Fable 2 is a game a lot of people remember for its ever-shifting morality, choices, economy, and even its relationships. On the surface, it feels like a really complex game, but when you actually start looking at it a little bit closer, you'll realize something. Fable 2 isn't nearly as deep as you remember. Peter Molyneux is known for hyping up his games to ridiculous levels, and to be fair to Fable 2, it actually delivers on a lot of what Fable 1 was supposed to be. You've got economies that react to what you do, relationships that change depending on how you act, and even co-op, which makes the whole game more fun to mess around in. And then there's stuff like property management. If you've played Fable 2, you've probably bought a house, cranked the rent up, and completely destroyed a town's economy for money you didn't even need. And that's the thing with Fable 2. It feels like you're making these huge decisions, like the game is actually letting you live in this world and shape it however you want. And honestly, that's what the game does really well. It feels like everything is connected, and it feels like everything you do matters. But once you start paying attention, that's where it starts to fall apart. Because when you actually break these systems down, they're not really that complex. In fact, most of them are surprisingly shallow. And this is where things start to get a little weird, because when you actually look at the choices in Fable 2, there really aren't that many. You've got the ones inside the story, like, do you sell the kidnapped people in Barrow Lake? Do you refuse to feed the prisoners in the Spire? Do you obey the Commandant? Do you sacrifice your youth? And then there's the 3 wishes at the end. There's really not that much for a game that's supposed to be designed around your choices, and you probably didn't even notice that on your first playthrough. The side quests do try to do more, but not by a lot. There are only a few choices that actually feel like meaningful decisions. Like in Red Harvest or Cold Comfort Farmer, you're choosing between helping bandits or helping Giles get revenge. Or in Defender of the Light / Oakfield Massacre, you either see Oakfield thrive or sink it into despair. And then there's Westcliff Development, where you invest money and the town actually improves later on. And to be fair, these choices do affect the economy. If you help Giles, Barrow Lake improves. If you side with the Temple of Light, Oakfield thrives. But that's kind of it. That's where the system stops. It doesn't go any farther than that. It doesn't affect the story. It doesn't lead to anything new. The game changes something and then just moves on like it didn't matter. And when you actually stop and think about it, these aren't really deep decisions. They're just switches. If you flip it up, Y happens. If you flip it down, X happens. And that's where the morality system really starts to fall apart, because being evil in Fable 2 doesn't really feel like you're being evil. Sure, villagers will cower, you will grow horns, and you will look more demonic, but that's about it. If you've ever tried to do a full evil playthrough, you probably know exactly what I mean. Compare that to Fable 1. In that game, you could actually be the villain. You could kill Teresa, take the Sword of Aeons, kill your friends in the Lost chapters, and even wear Jack of Blades' mask. You could actually feel like a villain. Fable 2 doesn't really give you that. There's no choices that will have you laughing like an evil maniac behind your controller. The most evil thing you can do is make someone fall in love with you and then break their heart. That's not exactly world changing. Instead, morality mostly comes down to 2 things. Are you killing random people, and are you raising rent? That's it. And then there's the economy. If morality doesn't interest you, you can always just become rich. You can buy properties, set rent, and own shops. On paper, that sounds like a pretty deep system, but when you actually interact with it, it's way simpler than it looks. It really just comes down to 2 things: what you charge and what you own. Raising rent, the economy drops. If you lower rent, economy goes up. Once again, that's it. And if you've messed around with this system before, you already know how easy it is to shift to the polar opposites of the economy on a whim, considering all you have to do is either raise rent or lower it. Then you've got the relationships that you develop with the NPCs. You can get married, have kids, build a family, and again, On paper, all of this sounds great, it sounds amazing, but when you actually spend time with this system, it becomes really shallow. And if you and I are being honest, it probably didn't hit as hard as it should have. The NPCs will say the same thing over and over again. Your wife is just kind of there as a gag so you can have somebody to sleep with, and your kids really don't do anything. When a game lets you get married, you should be able to build some kind of connection with that NPC, but Fable 2 doesn't do that. And all of these systems come to a head with the ending. After everything you've done, after all your choices, after shaping your character into the hero or villain that you saw fit, none of it actually matters. You're given 3 options no matter your alignment: love, sacrifice, wealth. That's it. The game not only builds all of these systems, but it tries to make them seem more complex than they actually are, just to ignore all of them at the finish line. And yet, despite all of this, Fable 2 still feels like a deep game, and you probably remember it that way too. But when you actually look at how these systems work, you realize that they were never that complex to begin with. Now, you might be thinking, Tony, you're just nitpicking at things. And honestly, I wish I was. I love analyzing things, looking at things in ways people rarely do. And when I took a closer look at Fable 2, the shallowness of the game became obvious. But that doesn't mean that I hate Fable 2. In fact, it's my favorite game in the series. It's the very reason why my first character analysis was on Lucian. And I want to say that Fable 2 is this incredibly deep RPG, but I can't, because that's just not what the game is. Fable 2 is a great game. It's fun, it's memorable, and it's definitely a hell of a time. But the one thing it isn't is deep.